and we're just met with confirmation bias in the Christian theologies that we are drawn to. But I'm going to talk to you guys about it through the brain. In Romans, Paul says, "I do not understand what I do, for what I want to do, I don't do. But what I hate, I do." We don't want to drink. We don't want to be on social media. And then we find ourselves doing that. So if your brainstem stops working, those things fail. 80% of your memory is linked to emotion. Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. There's a snake crawling toward you. You get the fuck out, right? And that part of your brain is it's going to be a really boring talk, so don't worry. No, I think I know pretty much everyone. And like Jeremy said, my name's Steven. I've been a Christian for 12 years or 13 or 15 years at this point, I forget. And what I didn't know when I became a Christian was how much of my pre-Christian thinking and thought processes I carried into my Christianity. And some things change really dramatically. You go, oh, God is very real now. Many of us that had like Pentecostal type of experiences, but you don't really realize just how much about God we think we know that we carry into our Christianity, and we're just met with confirmation bias in the Christian theologies that we are drawn to. And so while I would have called myself a phenomenal Christian in those early days, because I was doing all of the Christian things, I didn't realize just how much of my ideas about God really needed to be cleared up. And I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about that today, and why that journey is important to me. But I'm going to talk to you guys about it through the brain. And so we're going to do a little bit of like neuroscience and brain education. And I'm going to explain to you guys the reason. But first, I'm going to pray real quick because I need it. God, I just thank you for every guy in this room. I thank you that you love them, you care for them so much. And I'm grateful that I get to spend the time learning who they are and the intricacies of their lives, and how their brains, bodies, emotions, everything works together in unison the way you designed it. And so I just thank you for the mosaic of differences that everyone in this room plays a small part in the greater body of Christ. And I pray that we would learn about ourselves more and learn about each other more this whole weekend. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So in Romans, Paul says, "I do not understand what I do, for what I want to do, I don't do. But what I hate, I do." So how many of you guys have heard that verse before? And we all know this experience far too well. We do stuff that we don't want to do. We want to do that's healthy. We don't do it. We think about this often in terms of addictions or things that we're drawn to, maladaptive behaviors that we just wish that we would get rid of. Like you don't want to stress out over something that seems insignificant, but you can't help but finding yourself stressed. You don't want to be annoyed or pissed at someone, but you just can't help it. Or especially for guys, like we don't want to do something addictive. We don't want to look at porn. We don't want to drink. We don't want to be on social media. And then we find ourselves doing that. And there's this kind of like strong urge to do it. So we've heard Paul's statement in the Bible often used to explain that the reason we do these things is because we have a sinful nature. We can't get rid of it. It's not going to go away until we get to heaven. But the way to get, somewhat rid of it is just to be super disciplined, to change your behaviors, to, surround yourself with people that can help you change it. It's a lot of like willpower stuff. And this is where you really get the idea of progressive sanctification. Your spirit is made holy, but you still have to work out your sanctification and God's cleansing your body and your soul, the other parts of you, the entire time. And I'm not going to touch too much on this theologically, because I'm going to explain how our bodies work. I mean, some of the other uh, uh, answers to this question, of like, why do we do the things that we don't want to do? Um, Answers that have been posed or, offered up by the church is that we could be possessed by demons, or that demons are whispering into our ears to influence us in some way, shape, or form. Um, Again, I'm not going to talk too much about those things. What I really want to do is to talk about how our brains work. So this is a model. It's a very, can you guys see? It's an overly simplified way of understanding the brain. This model is called the triune brain. So there are way more than 3 parts of the brain, but these are all sections. And we're going to talk about all these guys right here. Each of these larger areas has several pieces that are all connected and talking to each other. And some areas in the limbic area are talking to the areas in the cortex, and talking down here into the brainstem, and brainstem's talking to the cortex. So they're all linked. And if we simplify it down to 3 main areas and functions of the entire region and network in that region, it helps us to understand how our brains work. So brainstem, a lot of its functions, well, here's the functions. Its primary function is to relay information from the body up into the brain, and to relay information from the brain down into the body. It controls things like our vital functions that we don't have to think about, like breathing, blood pressure, heart rate, those kinds of things. So if your brainstem stops working, those things fail and you die. It's very essential. It also controls things like reflexes, automatic reflexes, swallowing, coughing, yawning, sneezing, those kinds of things. They happen without your conscious thought. You can consciously control them with your cortex, but primarily they're run by your brainstem. Okay. Your brainstem also controls arousal and consciousness, and it regulates the level of alertness that you have, whether you're awake, sleep, somewhere in between. And it plays a key role in keeping you awake and conscious. Your brainstem directly controls the energy states of the other areas of your brain as well. So your brainstem can say, and it can divert the energy of your body into your brain primarily functioning out of your limbic area. And it can say 80% of our energy goes to being run by the limbic area, which I'll explain in a second. So it controls those states of arousal, for example, like if we're hungry or satiated, if we're driven by sexual desire, or if we're relaxing in sexual satisfaction, if we're awake or asleep, somewhere in between. So when you feel that deep drive to behave in a certain way, that brainstem is the thing that's telling your body what to do. Okay.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Less Heresy Than Expected podcast, brought to you by Icons Regospeled, a nonprofit resharing the true gospel of grace for all mankind to the icons of God. There's something about an all-loving Father throwing people, or even allowing them to be tortured for eternity, has never quite sat right with you, or if you're simply curious about different perspectives that still take Jesus seriously, we'd invite you to be part of the conversation by following us and the guests that we sit down with. And if this good gospel, this fully grace-filled, this genuinely for all people message feels like the air that you also breathe, we may have made the perfect conversation starter for you to take with you throughout your day. You can find it in our merch store, linked in the description below. And with that, let's get back to the conversation.
The next area is the limbic area. This area controls our emotions, So emotions play a central role, like feeling fear, pleasure, anger, and attachment. Um, it detects threats, and those threats can also trigger more emotional responses. So you can get in like emotional loops where you feel an emotion, you feel threat, the threat triggers another emotion, and this is where your brain's survival mechanism is. So I think on your sheets, this will say like the lower cortical area. Um, it's the same. It's the same area. It's the same functionality. Um, but I didn't make that sheet. I stole that sheet. It's a very good resource in just giving you a quick overview. Um, this is also where a lot of our memory is formed. So our memory is connected to emotion. In fact, 80% of our memory is stored in the limbic area, which is not where our higher cognition exists. So 80% of your memory is something called implicit, where we don't remember explicit details, but it's only linked to emotion. 80% of your memory is linked to emotion. That's a wild fact. And so when you think, I can't remember this situation, but if you feel something, your brain is still connecting feelings to the emotions of that memory. This is one of the reasons that emotional experiences are often more often remembered. Um, we also this is the limbic area is where we get like the reward system for our behaviors. So if like this is where a lot of addictive behaviors exist, right? When we consume uh, uh, food or alcohol, and we get like a dopamine rush from it. Even social bonding or like pursuing goals. This is the brain's reward pathway, and so it makes something feel satisfying and worth repeating. Um, and then the survival instincts like hunger, thirst, reproduction, and it regulates hormones. Um, and then emotional learning. This is where we're connecting emotions to our actual thoughts. It's creating meaning, and so the feelings that are coming up inside of our limbic area um, are filled with a sense of meaning because the limbic regions are constantly evaluating our situation. Is this good or is this bad? Is like the primary question that our limbic region is attempting to answer at any given point. And this is happening thousands of times throughout a day. Okay, cortex. This is where our higher reasoning happens, problem solving, decision making, abstract thinking. Um, uh, this is where sensory processing happens. So we're interpreting the meaning of the things that we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, which are coming in through here, but then being interpreted in our cortex. So uh, when we smell something that is um, maybe unique, uh, it's first often interpreted in the limbic area. And so if we smell something that's bad or hear something that's bad, that's a threat, our brain runs from it. If it's not a threat, then we can move it up into the cortex area and try to make sense of it. Um, this is also, we can control voluntary movement, like muscle movements, reaching for something. We can control our breathing through there, which is one of the reasons why conscious breathing is so effective, because this is the area that we can feel safe and loved in. And so if we're breathing from our brainstem, um, and it's just us and we're being driven by survival, we get in this loop right here. But if we're driving our breathing from our cortex, we're convincing our survival brain that we're actually in a safe state. And we can continue this loop where everything is integrated. And so breathing is one of the most effective ways to get out of survival, because we're now telling our entire brain that we're safe. It controls language, and it controls your self-awareness and consciousness. So there's a lot that happens inside of in our brain in like a microsecond. And what our brain has done over decades is it's created these shortcuts that we call neural pathways. So we've built bridges. Our brains have built bridges from one thing to another, and we have these shortcuts that are existing. It's kind of like a path being dug from house to house through 6 feet of snow, and there's really only one way to go. Or like in an electrical circuit, it's the path of least resistance. And so once a neural pathway is built, your brain constantly goes from one thing to another automatically. So here's some examples of how our brains do this in terms of what these neural pathways are. So your body is relaxed. So your brainstem starting to talk up here. You see a beautiful wedding ceremony. Input comes in. You hear the music and the vows. You think about love, family up here. You form meaning. There's so many good people around me. Brainstem tells your body to shed a tear, and this all happens in a split second. Okay, that's all the areas of your brain communicating with each other. Another example is like if you hear a loud noise that's startling, your limbic system receives that info and immediately says threat. That was loud. It is also the thing that kickstarts hormones, adrenaline, that kind of thing. So it tells your brainstem, send adrenaline out into the body, react, you immediately duck. That is another loop that happens. Same kind of thing happens if you like see a snake on the ground. Survival, threat, adrenaline kicks in, and brainstem tells your body to run, and it's a reflex. It just happens, right? You don't even think about it. So think about like the videos that you guys have seen on YouTube or something, where someone clips a fake snake onto a shirt, and then they say, "Oh, there's a snake," and then they turn around, they see it, they jump, and they just start running, and they run and they run and they run, and they can never connect in their brain that it's a fake snake. It's because there's a loop going on right here where their brain has essentially been hijacked because the brainstem says, divert all energy to the limbic area, survive because you're going to die. Okay? So they're not actually able to access this portion. There's no energy being directed up here to think logically. Okay? Your brain gets hijacked by this survival mechanism, and they just run and they run and they run. It takes a long time for them to realize it's not a fake, it's a fake snake. And again, this is exactly how our brains are meant to work. Our brains are meant to help us survive. If you stood there when there's a snake coiled about to attack you thinking, I wonder what that snake's going to do, you're going to die if it's poisonous, right? So we're trying to survive. Okay, another example. You're called into an unexpected work meeting with HR, and you don't know what's happening. You're bringing in this sensory input from here and here. You start to make meaning out of it. Oh, I'm going to lose my job. And your brain starts to think, oh, I need to survive this situation. So you start controlling the situation. You think, oh, I'm not going to be provided for if I lose my job. You start to panic and attempt to control the situation. Your brainstem starts to tell your body, start sweating. Like it's in the survival mechanism because you're thinking, and future tripping, I'm going to lose my job. I have to do something to prevent that from happening. Another example, taking a free throw to win a game. Once you got 3 seconds left in the game, you get fouled, you're down by 1. This is the prototypical scenario. And all of these inputs are coming in through your brainstem and your limbic area, and you're making meaning out of all of this. You start to wonder, if I miss this game, if I miss this basket, everyone's going to hate me or be disappointed in me, and I have to do this. But you can consciously breathe with your cortex, which is why you'll see every basketball player take a breath before they take that free throw. What they're doing is they're telling their brainstem they're not in survival. They can do this. Having quote ice in your veins is being able to be out of survival. You would think that like not thinking and getting out of your head is the thing that like actually helps you, but it's been proven that that doesn't help you in terms of gross motor coordination. Um, so what you want to do is you want to be calm, and actually that is the thing that lets you take over and win the game. So when you breathe, you're telling your brainstem to devote more energy back up in here, and make the game, win the game. Another example: coming home after a long, stressful day, and you feel exhausted. You can start feeling lonely or discouraged in that state. Maybe your thoughts start going to, I because of this lonely feeling, I feel like no one's ever taken care of me. As soon as you start thinking no one's taking care of me, or I'm just alone, or I don't have the support, you start to have these big feelings that start to surround that. When you start to have those big feelings, it can lead you into, or in many cases, it has led us guys into being like, oh, if I look at porn. That's like a common scenario that all of us guys, I'm sure, have at some point dealt with or gone to. When we do that, there's a very high dopamine release, especially when we're scrolling, very similar to social media. And then, especially if we masturbate and have an orgasm, there's a massive release of oxytocin, which is it's basically a drug, and it is the feeling loved hormone. So if at any point we have that massive release of oxytocin, we have this really big relief, and feelings of love that cover back over those negative feelings of feeling lonely, alone, wanting love, that kind of thing. And so, in terms of a neural pathway, you've got stress, lonely, computer, and then release. I don't know. Okay, oxytocin. And so you've got this pathway that goes from one thing to another. And now, like once this pathway has been wired up into our brain, coming from here up through here and back down to here, at any point, if our brain jumps into that neural pathway, it goes, I know the way. This is the way to get oxytocin, to feel loved, right? To experience not feeling that stress or loneliness anymore. Neural pathways are great at helping us to survive, but they're not great at helping us to really live and to be present and to be fully alive and engaged in life. Okay. If you start to think about how often these brain synapses are firing throughout the day, I mean, it's millions. Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. It's my favorite quote. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So we've got millions of these neural pathways that as soon as our brain latches onto one of these things, we follow it. And this happens millions of times throughout the day. And it's very easy to call it fate, to call it a demonic attack, to call it whatever, to call it a sinful nature, to call it something, because we don't understand how our brain's actually functioning.
Amen.
So, so one of the questions is like, how do we rewire these things, right? If the goal is to not do what we don't want to do, how do we change this pathway to become something different? Step one, come to this talk. Understanding on like even a basic level about how your brain works, how the brain works and how your brain works is step one. Okay. So education is good on how the brain works, but you have to understand how your brain works, right? This is the part that actually takes some focused energy where you start to become aware of what are all of the pathways that I have in my life. Okay. We go to counseling and we learn because we end up with this thing, this maladaptive behavior at the end, and we go, I need to fix that thing, right? Having an affair, having some kind of addictive issue, having like chronic relational conflicts, anger issues, not being able to manage really, really big emotions. That is the end of the neural pathway. And that's what leads us often into counseling. You don't need to have a really, really big, like bad maladaptive behavior at the end to go to counseling, because there's lots of tools through counseling that help us to understand this entire chain. These are the things that I will talk about a lot because I found extremely helpful in understanding how my brain functions, how it's been functioning, what are those pathways, and the next couple of steps of actually changing them. If you guys want to look at sheet 3, this is something we call the window of tolerance. This helps us to understand what's going on in the day-to-day in our brains. Okay, so safety right in that middle, that green section, this is often where we want to be. This is the green zone. This is where we're safe, social, curious, present, playful, fun, creative. We can feel love. We can extend love. We can hold two truths at the same time. We can listen. We can learn. We're not just reacting to people's opinions and actions, but we're actually responding in a thought-out way. This is the zone. This is where we are fully alive and engaged with life. If you were to map out in a 24-hour period where you are, well, actually, let me explain hyperarousal and hypoarousal. How many of you guys have heard of the 4 Fs? 4 of you. It's not on there. It should be. What are the 4 Fs? Throw them out. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Okay. Nope. Just 4. Okay, so hyperarousal is when our body throws energy at something. So your two Fs for this one are fight or flight. Okay, you're either fighting, getting aggressive, or you're fleeing and you're moving to do something. This is where you see people being really fidgety or anxious or kind of like ADHD types of behaviors, or getting mean, loud, angry kind of thing for the fight. The opposite is also an effective survival mechanism. Freeze or fawn. Freeze is when we just kind of like turtle inside, just immobilize. This is where we get indecision from, or depression or lethargy. Fawn is a little bit different, and it wasn't included until recently. Fawn is where we just kind of submit relinquish our authority to someone else. Where do you want to go for dinner? Doesn't matter. You choose. It's a way to avoid conflict. And fawn is, especially in relationships, one of the things that us guys do with the ladies. It is far better of a strategy than fight, but maladaptive nonetheless. So maladaptive means it was once adaptive to survive, but no longer plays a benefit. In fact, now it can hurt us, right? So drinking or addiction was a survival mechanism that helped us in one way. It caused us to numb out and to not feel some big things that were really threatening and potentially even very damaging, like traumas or actual abuse. Then our body develops these neural pathways. We still do the same behaviors later on in life without the tangible threat being there. Now it's just a felt sense of threat, but it's not actually a true threat that's there. Mhm. Yep. Yep. Mhm. Yep. Yeah. If that if that's the tool that you're used to using in most situations, and then you're in a different situation that's not the right tool for, it can be really damaging to yourself and the people around you. So throughout a 24-hour cycle, you will look. Yep. I didn't prepare. Okay. So you're looking just all over the place throughout the day. Okay. Um, when we get into this activation window, activation is the transition from hyper arousal to safety, or safety down to hypo arousal. There's this transition period. Okay. Remember, your cortex is primarily getting the energy in the safety area. And when you're in hypo or hyperarousal, your brain is devoting most of its energy into this survival area of the limbic region, which again means it's operating without your thinking about it. Okay. You're being controlled by your brain, by your survival mechanisms. And so if you want to experience love and peace and calm and good connection with people, we want to devote energy up here to the cortex. Um, so that's that transition period where your brain starts detecting threat and it starts to divert more energy down and into the survival-y part of our brain. With practice, you can start to notice when you enter into that activation state. You can start to notice when you're becoming dysregulated. Okay. Regulated is when we're safe. Unregulated or dysregulated is when we're in red or blue. And you can start to notice when you enter that yellow. So that's where you might feel some like hot or tightness in your chest if you feel anxiety, or you feel like maybe you'll get like sweaty or a little bit afraid. This is why this practical skills of like noticing and mindfulness are really important, because if you can become aware of them, then you can prevent your body from going into full-fledged threat and not being in so much and not being in control of your body. I'm not going to talk too much about these, but if you guys want, I can give you a massive list of tools, and I can just email those out afterward. But when you're in this activation, you can do things like breathing, mindfulness, grounding, like Jeremy did yesterday, where we're sensing and feeling the floor underneath our feet or feeling the couch beneath our body, because it's triggering the cortex to think about those things. You don't think about how the couch feels below your body if there's a snake crawling towards you. You get the fuck out, right? And that part of your brain is running the show.